It's a lot to talk about. But as we do this, you know, each and every day I do a radio program. And this is part of it. The fundamental duty of mankind is to feed the world. We take that very serious. Each and every day when we wake up, when I wake up, when you look at the challenges of the day, do we accomplish those goals and have enough food, fiber, and fuel for everyone? What is the largest industry in Louisiana? It's agriculture. Largest industry in America, agriculture. Now they talk about the Ukraine as the great breadbasket of the world. The United States exports twice as much food and grain as does the Ukraine. So put that in perspective. We are the largest exporter of grain and food in the world. What is the largest support system for the export of grain in the world? Where is it? It's right here, Port of South Louisiana. Not including Baton Rouge and New Orleans. 50% of the soybeans exported from the United States go through the Port of South Louisiana alone. Look at those big, beautiful, massive grain elevators. You know, that project that we're now at completion on dredging the Mississippi River down to 50 feet will markedly increase the amount of ships coming from Baton Rouge all the way down to the lowest elevator on the river, and will increase our share of America's grain exports to about 60 to 65%. That is huge. If you look at what's happening, and these numbers are about an hour old, you've seen the Dow all over the place. If you watch it every day, you must have a heart stronger than me. It's been a look. Don't focus on where it's jumping around, but it's going to get there. But I want you to look at these commodity prices. Corn, sit there, and that is in probably August, late August, early September futures. It's under $4. Wheat $5.57, beans $9.95, cotton $6.84, sugar at 37 cents, rice $14.77, ethanol stable. Price of oil, it's staying pretty steady around 80, but y'all seen some pretty big shifts in the last 2 weeks. And of course, gasoline has been fairly stable, but still trending high. Natural gas at $2.17. You know, we can live with this number. What is the big deal about natural gas? What do we make fertilizer out of? Natural gas, right? CF Industries. And cattle prices have not seen the downturn that we've seen in corn, wheat, and beans. Cattle prices have remained stable or upward. Why is that? There are fewer cattle in the United States. We're probably down 14%. 14% over a 4-year period. Todd, you may have to hit it. I think I broke it. Next. All right, so these are the latest World Agriculture and Supply report. This is as effective of 11 o'clock today. These are the latest numbers that just came out. But I want you to look at total grains. Total output, 2,756.78 million metric tons. Total use, 2,769.8 million metric tons. Consumption, greater than supply. Look at wheat. Production, 789 million metric tons. Consumption, 790. Look at coarse grains, 1451, 1459. Look at rice, 516 million metric tons produced, 519 million metric tons utilized. Next. And this is cotton. So look at cotton, world output, 116.46 million bales. Total use, 112.64. Next. So again, oil seeds, when you look at these numbers, the key is when you look at total supply, total use and trade, they're right about even as a little surplus. Well, what else are we doing with oil seeds besides consumption? It's going to what? Fuel, energy. So now I want you to start thinking about food versus fuel. Agriculture versus the oil business. Food versus fuel. Next. So if you look at continuing, Total, year over year, tighter supplies of grains and oilseeds. Next. This is a graphic. This is a little dated, so the numbers I just gave you are more consistent. But I want you to look at the red is consumption, the yellow is production. But I want you to look at that one over there with rice. And knowing that the red line is still now, this year, higher than the green line. Okay? What is the number one starch consumed in the world? Rice. Look at wheat. Same thing. What's the number two direct consumable starch in the world and protein? Wheat. Next. You look at soybeans, there's still some room over the top, and a lot of that's going into energy. But look at cotton, look at sorghum. See how tight those numbers are. Next. Global demand, beef. It's been static. Pork has been rising, but we're going to come back to pork in a second. But look at chicken. Why is everybody loving some chicken? It's cheap. Why is it cheap? Grain consumption, right? About 1.4 to 1.6 pounds of grain per pound of chicken, versus about 3.2 for pork, versus about 4.2 to 5. Well, what else? If you look at the genetics in the chickens, you look at a chicken from 1958. Man, it's tiny, right? It's small. You know, if you're talking about, you know, 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds at the market, and you see these big Miss Goldies there, in the showcase. So a lot has happened and advanced that towards efficiency. What's happening in the pork market, the pork world right now? What's happening in China? The Chinese are eating less pork. They're eating less pork. And then because of that, they're buying less what? Soybeans. Why are the Chinese eating less pork? They don't have the money to buy it. The Chinese economy is struggling mightily. If you look at the Chinese economy, you look at the Chinese government debt, you have to bear in mind, that's actually just one debt. They have municipal debt, which is greater than the national debt. And the bottom line is the average Chinese person is struggling very, very mightily. Next. So if you look at oil, and these oil prices, this was just a little while ago, so they're up a little bit. But again, the bottom line is that world crude is around $80. And of course, I think it's going to stay there. You're not going to see $100 oil, and you're not going to see it at 70. OPEC controls that, right? OPEC controls that. Next. A big factor in what's happening with our commodity prices or our exchange rates. You've heard me talk about those over and over and over again. We've lost a lot of trade because that euro is so weak at $1.09. It needs to be up to around $1.15, $1.20. What does that affect? When it hit $1, we lost all of our sweet potato market in Europe. They would buy the sweet potatoes from South Africa. So when the euro is down, and a British pound sterling, it's moving up, but it needs to be normally up around $1.50. When the American dollar is too strong against foreign currencies, it's more difficult for us to export. And then we import. For the last 2 years, for the first time in over 50 years, we've had a negative balance of trade in agriculture. We always had a positive balance of trade. It was the only physical commodity with a positive balance of trade. We've been running a $30+ billion negative balance of trade, predominantly because of these exchange rates. And that's why you're seeing, so if you remember a few slides back, supply and demand, right? Supply and demand. Well, why is corn under $4? Why are beans not $12, $14? Why are those commodity prices where they're at when demand is greater than supply? It has to do with exchange rates and the ability of foreign countries to buy our products. Next. So again, if you look at overall, and if you look what's happening across the United States, corn acres are down for 2023. These are Louisiana numbers. Corn is down. Well, of course it is. At under $4, you can't cash flow until you get really above 440, maybe 450, right? So this year's going to be tight for a lot of farmers. They're going to have to renegotiate, and we're going to talk about some of those federal farm loans in a minute. Cotton is flat. Rice is up 3%. Soybeans is rolling at 14%. So why would you plant soybeans versus corn? Puts nitrogen in the ground, takes less fertilizer, right? The price is a little better. Now, the prices come down, but they were booking some soybeans at 11. Next. And if you look at where we're at now, our crop progress is really good. Last year, these numbers were terrible. We were in a great drought, a drought that we hadn't seen in generations. But this year, if you look at that fair, good to excellent, that's pretty good. We've had pretty adequate rainfall in most areas, and we're starting to harvest. We're starting to harvest now. We've been cutting a little bit of corn, a little bit of rice, and those numbers are coming in. But by and large, most of the crop is in good to excellent. Next. Honeybees, if you look at overall for honeybees, we're looking at that, and the honeybee colonies are up about 11%. We really are pushing hard, again, for the bee business. People want to have natural products, local products, but also small farmers can go in the honey business. I'm a beekeeper, that's why I throw that in there. But I can tell you it does a world of good for my garden and for my farm. So but honey is big business. Next. And again, our production, though, if we went last year, knocked it down. The drought did. And I watered my bees. I have waterers out there for them. Of course, I give them sugar and I feed them and everything. Right. But again, honey production was down because of the overall drought, which knocked down the vegetation and decreased production. Next. So the crawfish, as you remember, we had a major crawfish problem from the drought. 100,000 plus acres simply dried up. So with crawfish, normally you have to build these ponds up over a period of years. You have to either seed the farm when there's water there in the rice fields. And then when you harvest crawfish, you always leave some to go ahead and naturally reseed it. On 100,000 acres, the level of groundwater went 18 to 24 inches below the surface of the field. So all the crawfish died. So when we started harvesting crawfish, we had 100,000 acres with no crawfish. We had a lack of crawfish in the basin as well because of the drought. Had a wonderful program, except it would cover for heat, it would cover for hurricanes, but it never anticipated in a pond-raised organism that you would have a drought that would dry up the ponds. So working with our congressional delegation, working with the governor, working with the USDA, we're able to change that, and we have gotten some assistance for our pond-raised crawfish. Then you may ask, well, why isn't there assistance for the farmers, the fishermen in the Atchafalaya Basin or others? That's not under agriculture. And so it's not covered under the Farm Bill. So we are looking at that, and we're having discussions with Washington, how we can look at that aquaculture. All right, here's a trick question. How much aquaculture, if you add oysters and crawfish in acres, is in Louisiana? Over 500,000 acres. You think about aquaculture, right? Most people, you talk to them about aquaculture, they think about a few ponds, right? Or they think about these big vats with something in them, right? We're in the aquaculture business. Just the crawfish business alone, if you look at today's numbers from the USDA and from the Ag Center, it's over $700 million. We have over 10 million pounds, of catfish we harvest each and every year. But this is important. Why? Many of these farmers got nothing, zero, not anything in the harvest. So the big question is, all right, what happens in November? What's the crawfish season looking like? I think you're going to see struggles in the crawfish market probably for 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 years. Why is that? That 100,000 acres got to be reseeded, right? And so at about 200 pounds an acre, at about $2.50 a pound, $2.40 a pound, that's $500 an acre that farmers got to put back and hoping that we have a good year this year. So I think you're going to see a tight supply. I think you're going to see strong prices or good prices in crawfish, but it'll take a few years. We built this crawfish industry over really a generation. It's the first time we had such a drought. Same way in the basin, it's going to take some time to rebuild that. Next. And again, if you look at, this is a program that we have just implemented. We got over $6 million from the USDA. It's called the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program. Next slide. And what that is for is to help small and medium companies, small, medium, minority companies, and others to get middle-of-the-road equipment to add value to their products. So if you're in the crawfish business and you need a machine, this will help that. So it had infrastructure, and it also was to buy equipment. If you were making, say you're making cupcakes or muffins or ice cream, but you need that one machine, this grant program would help you buy that machine. So again, and what it does on the infrastructure, large infrastructure projects, you had to have 50% of the total money for that. If you're historically underserved, you only had to have 25%. But it was a good program, and over $6 million that was invested there. We had about 10 times the number of people apply for this than we could serve. Show you the need out there. But this is going to make a big difference in the ability of our farmers, especially our midline farmers, to add value to the commodities they have. Special purpose equipment purchases. And it would pay 100% of that. Next. So again, we do have a Minority and Veterans Affairs. We're working very, very closely. Ms. Katrina Irvin heads that up so to make sure that everyone is involved in all the many programs, everything from the Certified Louisiana program to all the different grants that come down. These grants come down very quickly. And so as they come down, to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate. And if you look at fruits and vegetables and small acreage, a great deal of that is in the hands of the minorities and the veterans of veterans. Veterans really like to farm. They really do. I mean, that's a big deal to get them there on the farm. Next. So again, if you look at the minority-owned farms in Louisiana, we've got about 8,000. Women-owned farms, about 3,400. Black-owned farms, 3,000. Spanish, 849. American Indians, 526. And Asians, 131. Next. So the FSA has just released information on farm loans and looking at the struggles that many of our farmers are in right now. So three notable changes go into effect September 25th. Okay? They just announced this. Next. So if you can't make your note, there'll be a number of farmers can't make the note. At $4 corn, you can't make your note. So they're going to allow you to take this yearly note, put it on the back end. So say if you still owe 21 years, but just put it for year 22, that will accrue at an interest rate of 1% versus the other, which will accumulate at the same interest rates. So that will help. Next. So again, flexible repayment. So the way the farmer can time his payments when his crops come in. That way he has better ability to use that capital in the meantime. So that's important. Next. And reduce additional loan security. And so again, with the USDA loans, when you have a bad year and you need to flip that loan another year, or you need additional monies, then they're reducing the collateral down to 125% of the loan versus 150%. Next. So again, there was a $77 million payment over discrimination by the USDA, and this goes back generationally. And so that is in motion and was part of a bill passed by the Congress. Next. And so again, this the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program, USDA provided $2 billion, and it's part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And again, it's prior to 2021, the discrimination by the USDA. Next. So I've been working with the governor, and he had a very strong transition program, and agriculture and rural development was part of that, and I was part of that team. Next. Of course, now we have Mike Johnson, who I tell him every time I see him, he's in an ag district, ag and forestry. right? Ag and forestry, and of course next, then Steve Scalise there, and these are very good friends of mine, and we continue to work together. The Farm Bill, I don't think we're going to see it this year. They kept promising me next year, September, October, November. Oh, don't worry, the first of the year. Then they said November. Now they're saying the next. So an entire Congress, 2 years, on a farm bill, and they're not going to pass it. There's a big gulf in between the House and Senate, the Democrats and Republicans. They got to work it out. So my message to them, and I visited with Senator Boozman, I've visited with our senators and our congressional delegation. If you're going to kick this down the road, then when you do it, let's do it right. Let's put real numbers in the Farm Bill. The proper reference price numbers. Let's get it right. And if you're going to pass it, don't pass a bill in language only without the funding to implement it. If we have a good Farm Bill with the proper reference prices and the proper crop insurance and the proper disaster programs, we won't need to go back to Washington for an ad hoc bill every time we have a major disaster here in the United States. Because that's an inefficient way to do it, and we need certainty in the Farm Bill. So if they can take a little extra time, spend the time, let's get it right. Let's have those discussions and pass a very meaningful Farm Bill. Because again, it's the roadmap to the largest industry in America. And I think that's some very, very, very important stuff in this Farm Bill. One is crop insurance, where the farmers can buy up to about 75 to 90% coverage with assistance. That's important. A new sugar reference price on default, going from 19 to 24 cents for cane sugar. That's very important. We haven't changed that in many years, for proper reference prices. Act 228, prescribed burning. We worked very long on that, worked with Senator Allen and others. And what that basically says, that if you are not a certified prescribed burner, if you haven't taken the courses to become certified and done your prescribed burns under the tutelage of a certified, you got to do 5 under a certified burner, then you must call in and notify the office. You must agree to follow the prescribed burning precepts. We have set up a central dispatch system, and that's for firefighting and all other agriculture, all other emergencies. That information's got to be phoned into us. So the key is that before you light that match to burn, if you're not a licensed or certified prescribed burner, right, you've got to call us, you've got to notify us. And if you say, I'm going to burn it Thursday at 4 o'clock, say, no. You have agreed to follow the right prescribed burning protocols as written. You can't burn at 4 o'clock, and you sure can't burn on Friday if the winds are at 35 miles an hour. So to try to cut down on some of the issues. And the other goal is to increase the number of people. We have over 1,500 people that are certified prescribed burners. They take classes, they have to do burns, but it's very important. So they know how to do that correctly. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Because if not, you can know what can happen next. You remember this? This was on the interstate between Laplace and Hammond. Okay? This was a super fog, but you could smell the acrid smoke from the marsh fire, 200 acres, many miles away. But you see how thick that is? So the predominance of the issue was the super fog, but you could smell that acrid smoke. What's amazing, I traveled across the causeway on the same day, and there was a mile of fog in the middle, just in the middle. And in the middle of that mile was about a quarter of a mile where I could smell the acrid smoke from the marsh fire in New Orleans East. So it traveled like a river. Does that make sense? And that acrid smoke really, really causes a lot of issue. And the thing of it is, because of the drought, the land caught on fire and it burned 6 feet deep. How do you put out a marsh fire like that? And but one way, you got to flood it. Will it burn underwater? Absolutely. How long will it burn? Till it's used its fuel, right? And that's the thing about these marsh fires. Next. So again, we're doing more bagasse studies. There's a lot of excitement again. We got a lot of bagasse. But to utilize it for chemicals as well as for energy. So LSU and Southern are doing that, and we continue because we have a lot of there. On the Chevron decision, that's going to be a big deal. along with the questions doctrine. And we're really going to have to look at everything and everything that regulates us. Because again, you know, we are the state hand of the EPA. So through our pesticide programs and our restricted use chemical programs are all what that means. But if we put an extension to that, wherever you look at any laws for an administrative agency, when something is not defined in that law and something happens, we have to act. We can't wait 6 months or a year. So I think you're going to see more and more changes in legislation that says in these events that the agency can adopt rules to deal with whatever happens, subject to legislative oversight. There's got to be some mechanism to deal with issues, and that's what the Administrative Procedures Act is. But we're going to see. Forest fires, we did have quite a few since I've seen you, but mainly in the month of February next. Right now, if you look at where we're at, though, things look pretty nice. We've got a few little yellow, dry areas. Last year at this time was much worse. Next. We are now in the transition phase between El Nino and La Nina. And my good friend, the state climatologist, Mr. Jay Grimes, I said, what does that mean? He said, we're in the transition phase. So what does that mean? We're in transition. It could be wet or it could be dry. Right? But we had initially thought we would have very, very, very dry weather through August, then lots of rain from September on. So far, we're doing okay. Okay, next. But still, we haven't had any major hurricanes hit predominantly the coast. We did have some that put some weather up to 1. But again, we have not had that accumulated rainfall that we normally get from tropical storms and hurricanes this year. Next. And if you look in December, you see how red it is? That's how we were all the way into December. Next. And again, that shows you what it looked like after months of drought. Next. February 27th, you could see in Texas over there in that red zone, and here in Louisiana, we had a group of fires. Next. And that went over 2 million acres in Texas on the Panhandle. Next. But for us, it started off on the 23rd, we had 19. The 24th of February, 44. February 25th, 60. And then on the 26th, 4. And it didn't rain. Why did we go from 60 to 4? It's a Monday. People that were burning brush piles went home. So again, we tell everybody, if you're going to burn your brush pile, you need a water hose, a rake, a tractor, and stay there. Right? So those are fires that got out of hand. The weather conditions were perfect, right? And you had all that accumulated. So the question is, why don't we just say don't burn? If you don't burn on a regular basis, these brush piles get really big. And then people burn if there's a holiday or whenever. So again, fires. Next. And of course, that's what we don't want. Now, the good news is, no, go ahead to the machine. We have 20 more of these coming into service that we bought almost 3 years ago. Took that long to get them here and get them in service with the special cabs and engines and everything. So that's good, and new transports as we get ready. Now, you see this tree over here? See that one? That one there? This is the new thing. What is that compared to that? It is a dead tree. Next. We lost 14 million trees from the drought. So you're talking about the beetles. You got the Ips beetle and the southern pine. This is not a predominant beetle problem. This is a drought problem. They're coming in, and then because the trees are dead. So when you fly the forest, you'll see one tree dead. Some areas you see the whole forest dead. So when you travel, wherever you travel, look up above the canopy, with just for a second now, not too long, but look in about 20 yards. You see those dead trees. They're coming down. So again, if you see those big groups, and again, this is an issue. We've had some commission meetings, in the Capitol about the pine beetles, but also, that's what I turn the timer off. See, that's how I can talk more. But these got to come down. Now, will FEMA pay for this? No. We have to pay for this if it's on our highways or on our roads. And we got to get them down because they are coming down. Your utility company's got to pay for it, and your private individuals. So it's a problem. And they are going to come down over the next 2 to 3 years. Tops will fall and then they will come down. But this is a direct result of the drought. The reason you have entire areas that are dead is because that used to be grasslands. Then they planted trees, and then Mother Nature took her land back. That's the bottom line. Next. So again, Cuba, and there, a week after I was there is when you saw those big Russian ships in there, right? So that's Cuba, and that's the port next. And of course, y'all recognize him. He's right over there. Beautiful, of course. Go through him, Todd. That's the delegation that went, and we were there in May. We were there in May, and that is the agricultural commissioner there in Havana. Next. So, and this was the agricultural meeting, agribusiness council. The purpose of this meeting, when we brought our rice people, our soy, our poultry, is directly to sign contracts with the Cuban people. Since we were there, and I was there in February on a trip that was funded by the Foreign Ag Service with the blessing of the State Department, 7 of us, 7 ag commissioners went to see and to look and to set this up. But the bottom line is that Cuba has been taken off the list of nations that do not fully cooperate in anti-terrorist activities. With that designation, now private companies, there are over 4,000 private farmers, over 300 private co-ops can buy American products using American banks, American currency, and American internet. That is huge. Go ahead, Tom. And again, that's where we're trying to make that direct connections. But you can still see Havana is very poor. Go ahead, Tom. And that's what the city looks like. Go ahead. That's the big cathedral in Havana. It's one of the oldest cathedrals in the Americas there. That, the Cubans built, that is a monument to the USS Maine. And that's when they got freedom from Spain. This is an old mansion. There's a restaurant upstairs, and you can see it was torn apart during the Revolution. Next. That's where people do most of their shopping, not at the government stores. These are open air markets. You know what the primary currency there is? Dollars. Next. And that's the food supply that they have. Go ahead. And you can see that's where they get their daily, generally most of their daily food, and it's in dollars. It's not on their ration cards. Go ahead. That is one of the farmers. He runs a co-op of 100 farmers, privately owned. And there you can see us in the fields in the rural countryside. And that's, man, he's out there tending water. You can stop right there. I want you to look at that field. Can you imagine an American farmer with a field looking like that? What's the issue there? They haven't had what in 7 years? Fertilizer. Haven't had any fertilizer. No fertilizer. No new seeds. One of the things they've asked for is for us to bring the Ag Center back with us so that their farmers can visit with ours to get a better understanding of modern agricultural technology. They would like us to sell them better seeds, fertilizer, and other products. So we're going to be working with them, try to sell them. And I can tell you that the general status, I was there in 2016, and I went back in February and then again in May. They're in what they call their special times, which means they're struggling mightily. And so part of, if you look under the Monroe Doctrine, it's in our hemisphere. It's our, we have a right and a responsibility and a duty to be down there. And if we're not there, who's going to be there? The Russians and the Chinese. So we want to reestablish trade. We met directly with the Cuban president in February. 7 of us met with his staff. That's one of their primary tractors. There, that fellow won't let anybody drive it. That's the one new tractor I saw on the island. So Cuba is ready to move forward. They're moving towards capitalism, and they are ready to negotiate with the United States on the issues that we have in return for trade. So what do you think? And I'll close with this. What is the #1 issue for trade with Cuba today? The #1 problem. They don't have any money. No, so we've opened the doors. We've put our people together. They will buy $300, $400 million worth of products from the United States this year. They could buy in the billions, 1.5, 1.6 billion. They have no dollars. They have very little tourism. So that's something that's the next way to figure out how we can start trade. But again, on working on the issues that we have to reestablish a more normal type of relationship between the United States and Cuba. And agriculture is the greatest form of diplomacy. And they are hungry, and they want to buy our products, and we want to sell it to them. Okay? So I'm probably close to time, right? And with that, I'll answer any questions. Please. Thank you.
For Cuban agriculture and the sales, is it largely a political problem? How do we solve the political part of it?
Well, if you look back, the days of collectivism are declining, so they're moving towards entrepreneurship. So again, you have 4,000 individual private farms. The issue is how do we work with those private farmers to sell them fertilizer, to sell them better genetics, better seeds, to allow them to utilize some of the technical know-how that we have so that they can grow better crops. They're still going to have issues because of their lack of water. Now, the man you saw in the field with a hoe, he was moving water. He was out there because they had these pumps. But from a total political issue, they are moving away from a strict collectivism, strict under the communistic system of farming, and they're moving more towards capitalism and individual farming as a way. So that's the direction they're having. But they want to do better, and so, but the main thing is lack of money. But they are willing to negotiate with us on whatever the issues are. Good question. Mr. Molina.
My thoughts about the grain elevator down the river being canceled.
What?
Your thoughts about the grain elevator down the river being canceled.
Yes, so that was a $800+ million project, probably would have got up to about $950, maybe $1 billion. That was a very large facility, would have increased the Port of South Louisiana's capacity by over 10%, which currently has 50% of the nation's soybeans. So by not having that facility, you're decreasing competition up and down the river, which with that facility would have meant greater competition, greater ability of us to move our products, and a higher price for our farmers. So in addition to 100+ very good jobs and a $900 million+ investment in the community, it is going to have a negative effect on the value of commodities all up the Mississippi River. It's not just Louisiana. Those export facilities export grains from the entire heartland of America, from 33 states. So, the hope would be that at some point, Greenfield will reanalyze and look for another facility. But there's only certain areas you can build. And it's got to be, below Louis Dreyfus. I mean, if you look at where the land is, from there, basically within the realm of the port of Louisiana, South Louisiana, or you get into the ports of Orleans and Jefferson. But you've got to have access to water for the barges, water for the ships, rail, and road. And so if you put it too far, you got to haul that grain too far. So there's only certain regions where it will work, and we will see. But 4 years, and find the company. And we knew back in June. I said, look, if we don't get this done soon, that the company is going to pull the plug on it, and they did. So the question is, will they come back? Well, only the members in that board of directors in that boardroom would know that answer. Good question. Thank you, sir.
I got a report this morning, water power report.
Yes, sir.
And it said the rice had a great year for rice up north.
It's doing very well.
And they didn't say why contributed to no-till farming. I know a lot of times they were talking about it. Or some of the rice farmers going back to the old way where they had red rice, more rice was left in the field.
Well, I would think.
All over, even in Arkansas.
Well, I guess it would depend on what are you leasing that land for duck hunting, right? As to how much grain you let, how you say, fall out of the harvester. But they're going to try to harvest as much as they can, but they're really ramping up, production. And so if you look at rice, and if you look at rice in Arkansas, that's on the alluvial soil where, we would grow sugarcane if it would grow there. But the other thing is that a lot of those ducks, because it is so hot, we have the waterfowl less tending to come down here. They're staying up there. So the current shift in climate, where it's hotter, is having an effect on many things. It's having a big effect on crops. So crops are growing in the northern latitudes different than they did 20 years ago. But you're also seeing shift in ducks, shift in deer, and then are talking about wildlife from Mexico and further down moving up into this area. So we're still trying to understand that as well. And the other thing is that due to high-path avian influenza affecting ducks, I think it did shift some of the migratory patterns, and we're going back 4 years. So we're trying to analyze and understand what the long-term effect of that's going to be.
You gonna make a prediction?
If it gets cold early, if we can get some cold weather, I think the ducks will come down. If it stays hot too long, they're just going to be fat and sassy. And so you talk about a lot of discussions that even in Stuttgart, Arkansas, you don't have the geese that you did because they're staying up north and feeding there. So, yeah, we watch Stuttgart real closely so we know about what to expect down at Gaton. Yes, ma'am.
What is the major hang-up with passing a new farm bill before the end of the year? Because that's what the farmers want, right?
Yes, they want it. They want it now. So one, there is from the CBO, in other words, the cost difference between the House version and the Senate version is about $36 billion. The other is looking at some of the shift and maybe in the SNAP benefits, and the other is in reference prices. But beyond that, it's political. But those are some of the major, and look, when you're talking about $1 trillion farm bill, they can figure out $36 billion. And so it's just kind of a tug of war. The farm bill has always been a political tug of war. It's been a tug of war between the food program, which is 85%, 82 to 86% of the farm bill, and the commodity section, which is 14 to 15%. And so they've always been held together, but politically, between the Democrats and the Republicans, and with everything going on right now, you've got to get enough support, especially on both sides to pass the bill. So it's kind of in a political tug of war as well. Wait, back here, then I'll come back. Yes, sir.
Where would you say we are percentage-wise in terms of playing catch-up with the losses that we received last year with the drought and all the wildfires?
Well, if you look, the drought was about 1.6 billion. The wildfires, you're pushing probably about $120 billion. So you never catch that back. This year we haven't had the wildfires, which is good. But it'll take 12 to 15 years to regrow, that timber. And a lot of that timber, nothing has been done to go ahead and take that and clean that area up. So there are some programs federally, but most of them are reimbursement. Now, as far as the overall crop losses, this year's crops look good, and so they're doing pretty well. I've heard very, very few complaints. Some areas, we lost some of the early corn because we had too much rain. That was about 20% of it, but it's coming back. The big key is to look at the heat indices. If we can stay where we're at and not get those 105, 106, 107 days for 5 days in a row, which has a negative effect, especially on soybeans. If we can keep good weather through this first harvest of rice, that'll be good, and if we don't get any hurricanes. So right now we are in a weather-dependent commodity phase, if that makes sense. Everything else is in play. We've got adequate moisture and not too much, so that's good. But the heat indices, especially at night, will have a market effect on the overall yield of the commodity. And it just depends on where those commodities are between fertilization and farming of the fruit of that particular crop as to what effect the heat has on it.
And just real quickly, folks watching this tonight, what can they expect in the next year to happen to their prices?
I don't think you're going to see a market decrease in grocery prices. If you can see, inflation is still kicking in about 2.2 to 3.2%. Rarely do commodity prices at the store come down. You will see some demand destruction in some of the commodities, which means it gets too high, it comes down. But I don't think you will see a net decrease in commodity prices. What you see reflected in the store is reflected on everything it took to get that commodity there. So you got to go back 18 months on that. But the big hope and stabilization of inflation is that the prices in the stores will level off, and then incomes will grow at a faster rate than the inflation of the food, because food costs are a big part of everyday struggle in America right now. Okay? Well, here, then we'll go over there. Wait, here first.
I have a question about the beetle problem. Is it just pine trees or any dead tree now is susceptible?
Predominantly pine. Any dead tree, just depends on the creature that likes to get in that dead tree. But you're seeing some weakness in the water oaks, but it's predominantly pine. But some of the hardwood forests got hit pretty hard as well. But the pine trees are very susceptible, to the beetles. Okay?
This will have to be the last one.
The
Yes.
major wish list that you talked about at the federal level was, the farm bill and the inertia of political issue.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can think of on a major wish list for the Louisiana state legislature that you would like them to just put aside?
Well, keep passing those good ag bills, because that's a good thing. But I think when you're looking at the Louisiana legislature, we need to make sure that we have adequate investment in rural roads, rural bridges, rural infrastructure. Our ports, right? The ports. So you got to think, when I go to the grocery store, if I look at a loaf of bread, I'm thinking all the way back when they're planting that wheat. So we've got some major road issues, major bridge issues, but investment in our ports. And I'm talking about not only the ports you think of from here down, we're talking about the ports from here up. So like the port at Lake Providence, the port at Colfax, the ports on the Red River, all of that to move these commodities. And then looking at what is ever needed and working, and we work very, very well on the ag committees and commerce committees, and legislatively we all work very, very well. And I want to thank you personally for your help on all of these issues as we identify them and continue to work on them. Thank you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Next week, General Russell Honore will be here at 12:15. Thank you again. Thanks for coming.
And we'll give him a hard time. He's my good friend.
You can come back and ask.
That's right. And a second now, Michael?
Yeah, enjoy it.